The German bomber crews, men who had survived years of combat operations and had successfully attacked Allied positions throughout the Mediterranean theatre, suddenly found themselves facing something they had no defence against. The psychological impact of this new technology proved as devastating as its physical effectiveness. These pilots understood aerial combat, they understood anti-aircraft fire, but what they were experiencing now operated by different rules entirely. The system's effectiveness stemmed from its complete removal of human limitations from the engagement sequence. Once an operator acquired the target on their scope and engaged the automatic tracking mode, the radar maintained its lock regardless of what the aircraft did. The tracking data flowed continuously to the M9 director, which calculated the future position where the shell's trajectory would intersect with the aircraft's path. The guns tracked to that point automatically, and when they fired, the shells arrived at the precise moment and location where mathematics predicted the target would be. German air crews described a phenomenon that seemed to defy explanation. When they dove to evade, the flak bursts appeared at the bottom of their dive, forcing them to pull up into another predicted kill zone. When they turned, explosions walked along their future flight path, not their past positions. This wasn't suppressive fire designed to create a barrier of explosions that aircraft might fly into by chance. This was precision engagement, with machines calculating faster and more accurately than any human gunner could manage. The industrial dimension of this technology transfer proved equally significant. While German manufacturers continued to hand-build radar sets in workshops, treating each unit almost as a custom piece of equipment, American industry applied mass production techniques that had been perfected in automotive manufacturing. The primary contractor for the SCR 584 was Chrysler Corporation, and they brought to radar production the same assembly line efficiency they used for building vehicles. By the end of August 1943, Chrysler had already delivered 610 systems. Production accelerated through the winter, and by late January 1944, the Dodge division was shipping system number 1470. Additional units went to the Marine Corps and to coastal defense installations, with still more held as spares and for training purposes. The total production numbered at least 298 units from Chrysler alone, with other manufacturers contributing to a total that reached at least 1,700 confirmed systems, possibly more. This output from a single company exceeded Germany's entire radar production for the entire war across all types and manufacturers. The contrast revealed fundamentally different approaches to military technology. German radar sets required skilled technicians to assemble, and each unit possessed unique characteristics. Repairs and maintenance demanded specialized knowledge. The American system, by contrast, used modular construction and interchangeable parts. Soldiers with basic training could perform field maintenance and component replacement. Where Germany produced dozens, America produced thousands. The invasion of Normandy on June 6, 1944, represented the largest amphibious operation in military history, and the planners weren't about to leave its success to chance. 39 SCR 584 systems had been specially waterproofed for the assault, and they came ashore with the invasion force. These radar units created a defensive umbrella over the fleet and the beaches that made effective German air attack virtually impossible. Oberst Josef Priller, one of only 2 Luftwaffe pilots who managed to make an attack run on the invasion beaches during D-Day itself, survived the war to describe what he encountered. His post-war interviews described anti-aircraft fire unlike anything he had experienced in 5 years of combat operations. The fire wasn't the familiar curtain of explosions that pilots had learned to navigate. Instead, he faced aimed shots that forced constant evasive maneuvering, making it impossible to line up an accurate attack run. The Luftwaffe's failure at Normandy wasn't caused by cowardice or inadequate training. German pilots who had proven their courage and skill in hundreds of missions found themselves flying into a technological environment that negated everything they had learned. The few pilots who survived attacks on the invasion force reported the same impossible accuracy that had been witnessed at Anzio. The anti-aircraft fire seemed to read their intentions, placing explosions along their future flight paths rather than their past positions. The defense against Germany's V-1 flying bombs provided perhaps the clearest demonstration of just how revolutionary this technology truly was. The V-1, Hitler's first vengeance weapon, presented a specific technical challenge. These unmanned aircraft travelled at 400 miles per hour in straight level flight at constant altitude. In theory, they should have been easier targets than manned aircraft that could manoeuvre. In practice, their speed made them extraordinarily difficult to engage with conventional aiming methods. 20 SCR 584 systems were deployed along England's Channel coast specifically to counter the V-1 threat. Each system directed 4 90mm guns equipped with a new type of ammunition, proximity-fused shells that detonated automatically when they passed close to a target. The combination of radar direction and smart ammunition created a defensive barrier of unprecedented effectiveness. Hundreds of the flying bombs were destroyed before they could reach their targets in London. The statistics documented the transformation in anti-aircraft capability. On one Sunday, 97 of 101 V-1s were shot from the sky. In the first week of operations, the gun batteries destroyed 17% of the incoming flying bombs using conventional methods. By August 23, this figure had risen to 60%. In the final week of that month, 74% of the V-1s were being destroyed. On the single best day of operations, 82% of the incoming weapons were intercepted. The ammunition efficiency improvement told an equally dramatic story. The rate went from 1 V-1 destroyed per 2,500 shells fired to 1 destroyed per 100 shells. This 25-fold improvement in efficiency represented more than incremental progress. It marked the point where defensive weapons had achieved clear superiority over the attacking systems. German observers on the French coast, watching through binoculars, reported V-1s being destroyed with bursts of just 3 or 4 shells, a sight that contradicted everything their understanding of anti-aircraft warfare told them should be possible. The German failure to recognize and respond to the SCR 584 threat stemmed from a fundamental error in scientific assessment. In January 1943, Germany's leading radar experts, under the direction of Professor Abraham Esau, had conducted a theoretical analysis of centimeter-wave radar. Their conclusion, presented to the High Command with the authority of Germany's scientific establishment, declared that radar operating at such short wavelengths was physically impossible to implement effectively. They argued that insufficient energy would return to the receivers at these frequencies to enable useful detection. Based on this flawed theoretical foundation, Germany terminated all research into microwave radar technology. When German forces captured a British H-2S radar system in February 1943 and discovered that it operated successfully on centimeter wavelengths, the discovery came too late to prevent the consequences of the earlier decision. Germany had already fallen years behind in a critical technology, and the gap proved impossible to close under wartime conditions. German intelligence services consistently misinterpreted the mounting evidence of Allied radar superiority. Pilot reports describing impossible accuracy in anti-aircraft fire were attributed to better training of Allied gun crews, improved optical sights, or simply the deployment of more guns. The possibility that the Americans had achieved automatic radar tracking at microwave frequencies remained outside the realm of German conception until very late in the war. Throughout 1944, Luftwaffe electronic warfare units operated with equipment designed for the threats of 1942. The Fuji 227 Flensburg detector searched for emissions between 170 and 220 MHz, frequencies relevant to early British radar systems. The Fuji 350 Naxos covered a broader range, from 2500 to 3750 MHz, which included the SCR 584's operating band. However, even this equipment couldn't reliably detect the American radar's emissions, and more fundamentally, German doctrine didn't prepare operators to recognize the threat. German radar warning receivers were designed to detect search radars that swept their beams across the sky, briefly illuminating aircraft as the beam passed. The SCR 584's conical scanning technique maintained continuous lock on a single target, producing an emission pattern that German equipment wasn't programmed to recognize as threatening. Luftwaffe crews flew into radar-directed kill zones while their warning receivers remained silent, offering no alert that they were being tracked and engaged. The complete weapons system, produced by Chrysler and designated SCR 584, consisted of multiple integrated components. The radar itself, the heavy anti-aircraft battery of 4 90mm guns, the British-developed IFF identification friend or foe system, the power generation equipment, and the M9 gun director all worked together as a unified system. Each component represented American engineering capability at its peak. The cavity magnetron generated 300 kilowatts of microwave power, more output than entire German radar installations could produce. The servo mechanisms that enabled automatic tracking achieved a precision that German industry couldn't replicate with their manufacturing capabilities. The M9 director performed ballistic calculations that would have required teams of human computers working with mechanical calculators. The integration of all these technologies into a single, mobile, field-deployable weapon system represented a conceptual leap that German military thinking hadn't achieved. Approximately 1,500 of these systems saw service in Europe and the Pacific Theatre starting in early 1944. Each system could track aircraft travelling at 600 miles per hour, faster than any operational aircraft in service at that time. This forward-looking design decision proved valuable when German jet aircraft entered service later in the war, as the systems could track and engage even these high-speed targets effectively. By mid-1944, the Luftwaffe faced a crisis of attrition that couldn't be sustained. Adolf Galland, commanding the fighter forces, reported devastating loss rates. Luftflotte Reich had lost 38% of its fighter pilots in April alone. Luftflotte 3 had lost 24%. Overall, Germany had lost 489 pilots, including 100 officers, during that single month. The training centres had forwarded only 396 replacement pilots, including 62 officers. The mathematics of this equation meant the experienced pilot pool was shrinking at a catastrophic rate. These losses weren't solely from air-to-air combat with Allied fighters. Increasingly, experienced pilots were falling to anti-aircraft fire that exhibited accuracy no one could explain. Ground attack aircraft, essential to Wehrmacht tactical doctrine and battlefield success, became particularly vulnerable when operating within the engagement envelope where the 584 performed optimally. The closer they came to Allied positions to deliver effective attacks, the more likely they were to encounter the invisible net of radar-directed fire. Adolf Galland, in his post-war memoir titled The First and the Last, captured the psychological reality of this new form of warfare. He wrote that by 1944, approaching Allied positions meant entering zones where death was calculated by mathematics. The guns didn't aim at where aircraft were, but at where they would be. There existed no tactics to counter this, no countermeasure to deploy, only luck-determined survival. This represented a fundamental shift from warfare as a contest of skill and courage to warfare as a statistical calculation. In December 1944, during Germany's final major offensive in the Ardennes, German forces captured a damaged but substantially complete SCR 584 system near the town of St. Vith. Dr. Hans Plendl, recognized as Germany's leading radar expert, led the technical team that examined the captured equipment. His subsequent report to the High Command made for devastating reading. The Americans had achieved automatic tracking with accuracy that German scientists had believed impossible. They operated on wavelengths that German equipment couldn't detect or jam. Most significantly, they mass-produced these advanced systems while Germany struggled to build even laboratory prototypes. The conclusion was inescapable. Germany wasn't months behind in radar technology. They were years behind, with no possibility of closing the gap under wartime conditions. The captured system revealed innovations that violated what German science had determined to be theoretical limits. Automatic tracking that maintained lock despite target maneuvers. Electronic computation of three-dimensional firing solutions in real time. Seamless integration of radar, computer, and weapons into a unified system. The knowledge gained from examining this equipment came far too late to enable development of either countermeasures or equivalent systems. The technological helplessness that Luftwaffe pilots experienced contributed directly to the fighter pilots' revolt in January 1945. Germany's leading aces, including Adolf Galland, Johannes Steinhoff, and Günter Lützow, confronted Hermann Göring in a meeting where they laid out the impossible situation they faced. Johannes Steinhoff, credited with 176 confirmed victories, told Göring directly that they weren't fighting enemy pilots anymore. They were fighting mathematics calculated by machines. Individual skill had become irrelevant against automation. Göring blamed them for lacking courage, but courage couldn't defeat technology that Germany didn't possess. These weren't men looking for excuses or seeking an easy way out. They were Germany's most decorated combat pilots, men who had proven their courage hundreds of times. Their recognition that traditional military virtues had become obsolete against automated weapons represented a profound psychological breaking point. Göring's response, relieving Galland of command and threatening courts-martial against others, demonstrated the leadership's inability to accept the technological reality. Even the revolutionary Me-262 jet fighter provided no escape from SCR 584 directed fire. The jet's speed of 540 miles per hour, which made it nearly untouchable by Allied piston-engine fighters, meant nothing to radar systems specifically designed to track targets at 600 miles per hour. Oberstleutnant Heinz Baer, one of Germany's most successful jet pilots, provided testimony after the war about his experiences. They had believed their speed would protect them from anti-aircraft fire. Instead, they discovered the American guns tracked them perfectly. The shells arrived exactly where they would be. Speed only meant less time to execute evasive maneuvers. Several jets were lost to anti-aircraft fire that exhibited impossible accuracy. The SCR 584's ability to track and destroy jet aircraft demonstrated American foresight that German planning had lacked. The system had been built to specifications that anticipated faster aircraft than those currently in service, providing capability that proved valuable when the technological landscape evolved. The industrial comparison between American and German radar production revealed advantages that extended far beyond simple numbers. The SCR 584 had been designed from the beginning for mass production. General Electric and Westinghouse contributed to manufacturing, bringing additional capacity online. Through design optimization and production engineering, the cost per unit dropped from $50,000 to under $10,000, while monthly production rates exceeded 50 units at peak output. German production of the Würzburg radar, their primary system, totaled approximately 1,500 units across the entire war. All German radar types combined amounted to roughly 4,000 units, and each of these was essentially hand-built. No significant cost reduction was ever achieved, and production capacity remained limited throughout the conflict. This disparity reflected deeper advantages in American industrial culture and manufacturing philosophy. The SCR 584 had been engineered for operation by drafted civilians who received 6 weeks of training. German radar systems required engineers and technicians with months of specialized education to operate effectively. This democratization of advanced technology through design proved decisive in the context of total war. Beyond raw specifications, the SCR 584 demonstrated practical advantages that amplified its battlefield effectiveness. Setup and deployment took approximately 30 minutes from arrival at a site to operational status, compared to hours required for German systems. This mobility proved crucial during Italy's fluid campaign, where the system provided immediate air defense for rapidly advancing forces. The system maintained effectiveness in weather conditions that blinded optical systems. Rain, snow, and fog that degraded German radar performance had minimal impact on the microwave system's operation. This weather independence meant the defensive umbrella remained effective under conditions that had previously favored attackers. Maintenance simplicity represented another significant advantage. The modular construction allowed operators to replace components in the field without specialized tools or expertise. German systems required specialized technicians for even minor repairs, limiting their operational availability. The American system required only 3 operators compared to 8 for the German Würzburg Riese, reducing manpower requirements while improving effectiveness. Field Marshal Albert Kesselring provided testimony after the war about the strategic impact of American radar-controlled anti-aircraft fire. By early 1944, he stated, it had made tactical air support for German ground forces impossible. The Wehrmacht, which had pioneered and perfected combined arms warfare, found itself fighting blind while the Allies observed everything from above with impunity. The campaign against V-1 flying bombs provided quantifiable proof of the revolutionary advancement in defensive capability. The first week's interception rate of 17% using conventional methods rose to 60% by week 4 and 74% average by week 8. The best single day achieved an 82% interception rate. The ammunition efficiency improved by a factor of 25. These statistics represented the first time in the history of warfare that defensive guns achieved consistent superiority over attacking aircraft. The V-1, essentially a primitive cruise missile, flew predictable paths that should theoretically have made it an easier target than a manned aircraft. Yet its 400 miles per hour speed had made it nearly invulnerable to conventional anti-aircraft methods. The SCR 584 changed that equation completely, turning a terrifying weapon into something that could be reliably intercepted. German electronic warfare capabilities, which had proven highly successful against British radars early in the war, proved completely ineffective against the SCR 584. The Luftwaffe's sophisticated jamming equipment operated on meter wavelengths and had no effect whatsoever on microwave systems. German Dupel, their version of chaff cut to meter wavelengths to create false radar returns, was equally useless against the American system. The failure extended beyond equipment limitations into doctrinal assumptions. German electronic warfare doctrine assumed adversaries would use similar technology to their own. The possibility that Americans operated radar on completely different physical principles remained unconsidered until captured equipment revealed the truth. By that point, Germany lacked both the resources and the time to develop new countermeasures, even if they had the technical capability. The SCR 584's influence extended far beyond the aircraft it destroyed. By making German reconnaissance impossible over Allied-held territory, it blinded Wehrmacht intelligence. German commanders couldn't observe Allied preparations, track troop movements, or identify weak points in defensive positions. This intelligence vacuum contributed directly to German strategic failures throughout 1944 and into 1945. General der Panzertruppe Hasso von Manteuffel, who commanded the 5th Panzer Army during the Battle of the Bulge, described the operational impact in stark terms. They had attacked blind in the Ardennes. Their reconnaissance aircraft couldn't survive over Allied lines. They knew nothing of enemy reserves or movements. The element of surprise, essential to their operational plan, became impossible when only one side could see the battlefield. For Luftwaffe aircrews, the SCR 584 represented something psychologically devastating beyond simple danger. Death delivered by machines that eliminated human skill from combat. Pilots who had trained for years, survived hundreds of missions, and earned their nation's highest decorations found themselves helpless against automation. The testimony of survivors reveals the profound psychological impact of this realization. Hauptmann Heinrich Baer, reflecting on his wartime experiences, expressed what many combat pilots felt. They could accept being outflown by better pilots. They could accept being outnumbered. What they couldn't accept was irrelevance, the reduction of their skills and experience to meaningless factors in an equation they couldn't influence or even understand. Their years of training and hard-won expertise counted for nothing against machines that calculated trajectories without emotion, fatigue, or error. After Germany's surrender, Allied intelligence officers conducted demonstrations of the SCR 584 for captured Luftwaffe officers. Their reactions ranged from amazement to bitter recognition of what they had faced. Many expressed relief at finally understanding the phenomenon that had killed so many of their comrades. Dr. Wilhelm Runge, who had worked on German radar development during the war, admitted in a 1985 interview that they had dismissed every report that contradicted their assumptions about American capabilities. They had created elaborate theories to explain impossible anti-aircraft accuracy rather than accept the simple truth that the Americans possessed better technology. This arrogance, he acknowledged, had cost thousands of German lives. The German military's institutional inability to recognize American technological superiority stemmed from deeper cultural assumptions about German scientific and engineering supremacy. The Wehrmacht, which had pioneered military innovation throughout the 1930s and early 1940s, couldn't conceive that American engineers had surpassed German science. This blindness persisted even as evidence mounted throughout 1944 that something fundamental had changed in the technological balance. Following the war, the radar technology and principles developed for the SCR 584 were adapted for use in various systems, including the AN/MPQ-12 and the AN/MPM-38. The system provided the foundation for the MGM-5 Corporal, a U.S. Army field artillery missile system. The fundamental principles established by the SCR 584, including automatic tracking, computer-controlled prediction, and systems integration, became the conceptual foundation for all subsequent air defense systems. Every modern surface-to-air missile system descends conceptually from the SCR 584. It established the proof that effective air defense required removing human reaction time from the engagement cycle. This lesson, learned through the destruction of the Luftwaffe's combat power, shaped military technology development throughout the Cold War and continues to influence defense systems today. While complete statistics remain difficult to establish due to wartime record destruction and classification, available data demonstrates the SCR 584's devastating effectiveness across multiple metrics. Confirmed production reached a minimum of 1,700 units from Chrysler alone, with documented totals of 298 units when including additional contracts. Peak production exceeded 50 units per month. Combat effectiveness metrics tell the story clearly. At Anzio on the first night of deployment, 7 of 12 bombers were destroyed for a 58% kill rate. V-1 interception peaked at 82% on the best day. Ammunition efficiency improved by a factor of 25. The D-Day invasion included 39 units that provided complete air defense over the beaches. Technological advantages over German systems were substantial across every metric. Detection range of 40 miles doubled German capability. Accuracy of 75 feet compared to German systems that achieved 500 feet or more. Tracking was fully automatic versus German manual tracking. Setup time of 30 minutes compared to German requirements of 2 hours or more. The German encounter with the SCR 584 offers enduring lessons about the nature of technological surprise in warfare. German leaders, convinced of their own superiority, constrained by theoretical assumptions that proved incorrect, and unable to imagine that American innovation could surpass German science, sent their air crews to face a threat they didn't understand and couldn't counter. General der Flieger Paul Deichmann provided a summary of the failure in his post-war writings. They had believed what they wanted to believe, he stated. Every piece of contradictory evidence had been explained away through elaborate rationalization. They couldn't accept that American engineers had achieved what German scientists had declared theoretically impossible. By the time they faced reality, the Luftwaffe as an effective fighting force had ceased to exist. The failure wasn't primarily one of intelligence gathering. German observers reported American anti-aircraft effectiveness accurately. The problem lay in intelligence interpretation. The reports were dismissed because they contradicted institutional assumptions about American technological capabilities. This cognitive blindness proved more damaging than any security breach or espionage failure could have been. The SCR 584 embodied American industrial philosophy of mass production, standardization, and simplification. Rather than crafting perfect individual units, American engineers designed for reliable mass manufacture. This approach, derived directly from automotive production techniques, proved superior to German craft precision for military applications, requiring deployment in large numbers. The contrast extended into operational philosophy. German military culture emphasized expertise and specialization, valuing skilled operators who understood their equipment intimately. American design philosophy emphasized simplification and automation, seeking to remove the requirement for expertise. The SCR 584 succeeded precisely because it removed human skill from the equation, making specialized training unnecessary. This democratization of advanced technology through engineering design proved decisive in the context of total war. The SCR 584 marked the end of aerial warfare as fundamentally a contest of human skill between pilots and gunners. It initiated the age of automated combat that continues to this day. For the Luftwaffe, this transition came as an incomprehensible shock. They had entered the war as knights of the air, heirs to the fighter-pilot tradition of the First World War, and they ended it as victims of mathematical calculations executed by machines. Johannes Steinhoff, reflecting decades after the war, provided perhaps the most insightful assessment of what the SCR 584 represented. It didn't just shoot down German aircraft, he observed. It shot down their entire conception of warfare. They had thought war was fundamentally about courage, skill, and will. The Americans proved it was about technology, production capacity, and automation. They were magnificent warriors, he concluded, defeated not by better warriors, but by superior machines. The SCR 584 radar system stands as one of World War II's most decisive weapons, not primarily for the number of aircraft it destroyed, but for what it represented about the future of warfare. It demonstrated the triumph of systematic technological superiority over traditional military virtues. The Luftwaffe faced an enemy that couldn't miss because the enemy had eliminated human error from the aiming process through automation and computation. German pilots never fully understood what they faced during their missions because their leadership couldn't accept its existence even when confronted with evidence. Reports of impossible anti-aircraft accuracy were dismissed as exaggeration from stressed crews. Evidence of automatic tracking was ignored as theoretically impossible. By the time German scientists finally examined captured SCR 584 units and understood the technology they were facing, the Luftwaffe had already been reduced to combat ineffectiveness. The Germans never truly knew that American radar had devastated the Luftwaffe because acknowledging that reality would have required admitting fundamental inferiority in science, industrial capacity, and military innovation. That psychological barrier proved insurmountable until total defeat made denial impossible. German military culture, built on assumptions of technological and tactical superiority, couldn't accommodate the truth even when it was destroying them. For the Luftwaffe air crews who faced this system in combat, the SCR 584 represented death calculated by machines and delivered by machines. They flew into electronic killing fields where their fate was computed before they arrived at the target area. The age of the warrior pilot ended in the skies over Europe and Italy, destroyed by American radar that tracked invisibly at frequencies their equipment couldn't detect, calculated instantly using analog computers, and killed automatically through perfectly aimed guns that never tired, never lost focus, and never missed their calculated interception points. The legacy of the SCR 584 extends far beyond its wartime service record. It established the template for modern air defense and proved definitively that in technological warfare, the side that successfully automates the kill chain achieves decisive advantage. The Luftwaffe learned this lesson through the destruction of its combat power, one aircraft at a time, with each loss calculated and delivered by machines that operated without mercy, because machines don't understand mercy. The Germans never knew, until it was far too late to matter, that they weren't really fighting American gunners at all. They were fighting American mathematics, embodied in radar systems that turned the sky itself into a computed killing zone, where every point in three-dimensional space could be calculated, predicted, and targeted. Their courage, their years of training, their accumulated combat experience, all became irrelevant factors in equations they couldn't see, couldn't detect, couldn't jam, and couldn't survive through skill alone. In that terrible revelation, experienced by thousands of German airmen in the final years of the war, lay the birth of modern technological warfare. Victory in this new form of combat belongs not to the brave or the skilled, but to whichever side possesses superior technology and the industrial capacity to deploy it in decisive numbers. The Luftwaffe discovered this truth at tremendous cost, and their discovery changed the nature of aerial warfare forever. The machines had won, and the age of the warrior pilot had come to an end over the beaches and battlefields of Europe, destroyed by invisible radar beams and automatic computation that cared nothing for courage, tradition, or the human element in combat.